Our nation is going through some really unprecedented times right now. My name is Michael Santos, and I'm continuing this effort to show our daily journal to show how even during unprecedented times, we should be working toward a more positive outcome. Today is Friday, January the 8th. As you can see from the top of this screen, it's 6:30 in the morning, a Friday morning, and it's a morning that I hope that you will be using to advance your prospects for success regardless of what's going on. And there's a lot going on. We see the news right now covered with all of the chaos that's going on in our nation's capital in Washington D.C., which is really brings a lot of memories back to me of when I was going through federal prison. And I'm going to tell you about a very specific instance today of when a riot took place while I was probably in my ninth year, maybe my eighth year of imprisonment. I don't remember really. It was another time of really great social unrest. It was the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, and there was a lot of division in the country. What was that other fella that got beat down? Rodney King got beat down a few years earlier. And so, the prison system, which really holds a lot of people of color, much disproportionate, to society. And, now we're getting attention on some of these, this institutional racism or social injustice that happens throughout the country. But at that time, it wasn't quite what it is today. And so it was a cauldron of pressure inside of higher security prisons, which is where I began my sentence. Later, I went to minimum security camps, but I started in a high security United States penitentiary where I was for 6 or 7 years. I don't even really remember. Starting in 87, and then I went to medium security prisons where I was for a few years, and then I went to low security prisons where I was for 8 years, and then to minimum security camps. But today I'm going to tell you about what I see in Washington, D.C. with all of the turmoil today and how it reminded me of what goes on inside of a prison. And show about the different responses that governments takes, because a prison we are really in a total institution. We are in an environment where the administration has absolute control over what goes on. They control what we eat, when we sleep, with whom we share our room, when we can have access to family, how much communication we have with society. I mean, they control the entire institution. And so it makes sense that they should also bear some responsibility of what comes out of there. Now, as an individual, I always knew that where I live, understanding where I live and what goes on in there, it's my responsibility to figure that out. It's my responsibility to succeed, even though there are going to be many factors really almost conspiring to my demise. And you can see that through the recidivism rates, right? The longer we expose somebody to corrections, the less likely that person becomes to emerge successfully. So if a person wants to emerge successfully, that person has to think, okay, there are people that really want me to stay in here and want me to stay for a long time. And it's my responsibility to succeed anyway. That's the same issue with you, regardless of where you are. There are people that don't want you to succeed, and there are powerful people that will try to keep you down, and yet you've got the responsibility to figure out, how do I grow stronger? And that's really what our work is all about, and it's one of the reasons I highly recommend that if you're going through a struggle, you take a look at our book, The Daily Journal, which you can get right from our website at Prison Professors on the store link. And the reason I think that you need to get it is because we need to think outside of the box. And we need to think, I know that's a cliche, but we do. We can't think about what everybody else tells us can happen. We've got to think about, what can we do to get the best possible outcome given the situation that we're in. Nobody can change the past, but we can always change the future. And we can engineer the future. Well, in prison, I'm going to tell you this story that's really emblematic or illustrative, I think, of what we saw in D.C. We had an administration prior that, and this is, I'm talking about when these riots occurred, when I was at the Federal Correctional Institution in McKean, Pennsylvania. And for weeks coming up to this day, there was just this enormous amount of pressure. Okay. But okay, I got to back up a little bit. I would say when I first got to McKean, I kind of engineered my way to get there because it was the best federal prison for me at that given time. I started in a USP Atlanta, very violent, high security federal penitentiary, was there for several years. After about 6 or 7 or 8 years, I knew that I needed to navigate my way to a better place. I made those preparations. I sowed the seeds. I laid the plan. I documented the strategy. I created my tools, tactics, and resources, executed the plan, and I got to the place where I wanted to go. And it was phenomenal. While I was there, I made great progress. I got my master's degree. I started working toward a PhD and was making great progress in that prison. But there was social unrest, and there were things going on in the country. And that whatever was going on in the country was like magnified 10x inside of the federal prison system. And there was news that there was going to be a disruption, primarily because we had an administration change. Now, it's not quite the same kind of administration we're having right now. What would happen is we had really a phenomenal warden. His name was Dennis Luther, who was in McKean for several years. And he was a leader. He was a leader that was really innovative in creating programs that would teach and inspire people. He believed that every individual had the capacity to grow and change, and because of that capacity, he wanted to incentivize a pursuit of excellence rather than threaten the punishment. But he retired, and when he retired, they brought in a new administration. And with this new administration, they wanted to bring McKean back into line with the rest of the prison system. They didn't like all these incentives. They didn't like these concepts like Family Day or the Inmate Benefit Fund, which would allow people to work toward having the privilege of being able to buy pizza or something from the community, or being able to have additional privileges inside of the prison, or compete for best housing unit or something along those lines. Which they had these, they used the incentive mechanism that makes America great in corporate sector, but put it inside of a prison setting. And that's why it was so successful and why I was able to make so much progress there. But Warden Luther retired. And when he retired, he brought in a new administration that really liked to brand itself as being law and order. Well, the prisoners, and there were 1,500 or so prisoners inside of that institution, many of them were, like that mob that you saw going on to Washington, D.C. Many of them didn't know how to respond to this change in a positive, constructive way. And so some, leaders in the prison who had authority or influence in the prison abused that authority and whipped the people up into a frenzy. And you saw kind of the same thing happening that we saw on television. They did millions of dollars of damage to the institution. But the funny thing is, the administration knew it was coming, and they could have blocked it, but they did nothing. They stepped aside. Why? Because that chaos was going to advance the agenda of bringing McKean back into alignment with what the Bureau of Prisons wanted. They needed to have that disruption because that disruption would give them the argument that this is we need more rules. We need to take away privileges. We need to rip away all the things that Warden Luther had installed. And that's what they effectively got. And that's what we saw in Washington, D.C. They knew because for months there has been this whipped up frenzy, and all of these leaders, which are no different than the influencers that were in prison, in the sense that they know that their words have power. They know that they have the ability to incite people to do things that people ordinarily wouldn't do. I'm not really castigating the mob that turned into a criminal faction raging into our nation's capital as insurrectionists. I'm sure, I have no doubt, these are law enforcement officers, military people, good citizens that differ with policy. But leaders in our republic whipped them into this ridiculous frenzy that had no upside. It had nothing but downside, and it was all for the purpose of advancing an agenda that was rooted in deception and rooted in a lie. And everybody knew it. But when you whip people into a frenzy, they act inappropriately in ways that are realistically outside of their character, outside of their scope. Well, now a lot of those people are going to be standing up for count in federal prison. And if there is justice, the leaders at the very top, and I'm talking about elected officials and journalists and all kinds of people that whipped everything into a frenzy, should hold themselves accountable, or society should hold them accountable in the same way that we hold the people who are locked in prison accountable for their decisions. But the reality is, as a human being, I know my job is to succeed regardless of what's going on outside. And that's the same as it is for you. And that's the reason I write all of these books, I produce all this content, to show people how to focus on reaching your highest potential regardless of what's going on around you. And so in the Daily Journal, I'll give you an example. Like today's message is talking about, how did I get inspired by leadership when I was going through there? And then here's the caption from an entry that says, publicly traded companies recognize the value of getting guidance from a diverse group of people. Shareholders or the owners of the company elect a board of directors to look after their interests. They trust the board of directors to put the right people in place to increase value for all of the shareholders. This strategy is something that we can use in our personal life as well. And you'll see, as I move this screen out of the way and go to a different screen, you will see that it's something that I do every single day. In fact, yesterday's work was exactly about that, building my team of shareholders, of stakeholders who are going to advance our interests in I should say lessening. Well, advance our interests of helping more business people understand the ramifications of their actions. Because many people make actions that bring them into the crosshairs of a government investigation, and those actions eventually can lead them into the criminal justice system with charges for white-collar crime or other types of crime. Now, I'm not talking about the people who knowingly engage in criminal misconduct. I'm talking about how the government can investigate people for decisions they make without having any idea that they're committing crimes. And yet those people don't understand the full weight behind their decisions. And that's why I've built this page that's here that you could see anywhere on any of these, any of these areas. You can go to the sidebar and you will see these different sidebars, right? And on these sidebars, if I scroll down here and I click on here, right, I will see these different sidebars, and I can click on this one, which is under Compliance Case Studies, Case Study Library, and you see how I'm building this page. And every day we're publishing new content that will help people understand what goes on in business that leads people into the criminal justice system. What decisions do people make? Here's a great one at Dish Networks, right? Great big company that got involved in telemarketing fraud, and a lot of people that worked there really didn't know that they were violating the telemarketing sales rule. And as a result, many people got wrapped into litigation, and it ended up costing them quite a bit of money. And why did this happen? Well, it happened because the people that were involved in this company didn't know that their crimes were violating federal rules and regulations, and for some could lead to federal prison. So we believe we've got to train people and we've got to help people understand this is how we build trust. This is how we build our company. It's something that I would recommend you think about doing, and it's the reason that I recommend you get this book to start a journal. Document your story. That's what this program is really all about. Mitigation is all about helping the world see you for what you are, rather than the way that government investigators would like to portray you. All of those people that are now facing criminal charges in Washington, D.C. are going forward not the way that they saw themselves, but the way that the government is going to now build a case around them. And as a result, the kind of Sophoclean irony is that President Trump is the one that signed this bill that demands 10 years imprisonment. There are going to be prosecutors asking for 10 years imprisonment for many of those people that followed the president's direction to go and contest, or follow Rudy Giuliani's direction to have trial by combat. Well, sadly, there are going to be consequences that follow that for a lot of people. But our team is here to help. So I'm Michael Santos with Prison Professors. I do hope that you will subscribe to the channel. You can do so right on the banner. If you want to learn more about our team and how we help people, just download some of our resources, whether you're watching this on Prison Professors or you're going to visit us at Compliance and Mitigation. We'd love to help you help yourself. As you can see, we give away a tremendous amount of free information. All of it is predicated on what we have learned after having gone through government investigations. As our motto is, we did the time so you won't have to. It's now 6:46 and I've got to get back to work. So do you. Please subscribe to the program and contact our team if you think we could be of some help to you.